It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Craig, we've had an incredible 48 hours since the inaugural of President Donald Trump. Dozens, if not hundreds, of executive orders have now been signed, and they affect almost every part of American government and society. What are your thoughts about this kind of blitzkrieg that he's created in the first couple of days of his administration?
Well, clearly the strategy was to create this drama and rapid action. A lot of time, I think, was spent thinking about how it was going to be portrayed and photographed, and imagery of him signing documents at the Capitol and signing documents back in the Oval Office. I don't know that as much time was spent actually thinking through some of the things he was doing. In fact, I'd lump it together with the pardons, and the one story that's out that to me is kind of appalling on multiple levels is that not even Trump's own people expected everybody who'd participated in January 6th to be pardoned.
Right.
They were clearly going to select, out and not pardon those who had committed violent crimes against law enforcement in particular. And yet, the president-elect at the time apparently became impatient with this thoughtful process and said, just free them all. I say it's troubling on two levels. One, that he's so impetuous that he would actually go back on things he'd said previously, go back on, anyone's common sense that you don't release people that have already committed violent crimes against law enforcement. But the second level is nobody stopped him. They said, well, if you want to do it, let's go do it. And that, I think, kind of also then belies this crazy executive order, kabuki that we're watching. Because executive orders, if they're going to stand, have to be thoughtfully considered, vetted with lawyers, and usually there's a base of support for them. And by throwing so many of these things out there, I think that what the Trump administration is going to find is a pattern of opposition. I call it the three C's. First, you've got constituencies that are going to oppose every one of these that are touched by them. Then you have the courts, because the court they're going to have to go to court to defend many of these. And finally, you have the Congress. The Congress is at the present time, at least my Republican friends, willing to go along with this. Speaker Johnson saying last night he wasn't going to second guess the president on the January 6th pardons, which I thought was curious leadership position to take. But the fact is they're going along so far. But that's so far. If the constituencies build opposition, which they will, if the courts begin to reject these notions, which they will, and maybe it'll go to the Supreme Court, I'm sure President Trump feels confident that they will bless his actions, but that's not a given. Some of these things are just going to fall by the wayside. So I've actually kind of adopted this theory of just let them go do this, and it's going to have to get sorted out. I really find, I will say, that the DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion executive order that Lyndon Johnson signed, which has been actually retained by presidents since Johnson, Republicans and Democrats, putting these people who do this in the federal government on leave, telling the country that companies that engage in this activity should be investigated, just really is almost painful to watch. I've sort of thought of diversity, equity, and inclusion as being the things you should do. Every organization I've run, we were sensitive to those elements of our hiring practices and the way we treated people. And it just dismiss it outright because it's somehow woke or somehow become a political punching bag. I think is particularly insensitive. So I think, I would say one other thing on this. We've got a ways to go, but here's the crazy thing. I don't think Trump really gets much satisfaction once he's gotten the photo up. Now, last night, he was on Hannity, being interviewed by Hannity, talking about how you could solve all these fire problems in California. You just need to move more water from Northern California to Southern California. This has been a centuries-old debate. He also discovered that a lot of water, when it rains, goes into the Pacific Ocean. Well, this is called runoff, and you just don't capture all that. But he has these simple-minded solutions for everything and the belief that he knows better. And, if he does, he does. But I somehow don't think in the next months and weeks we're gonna discover that he's got the answers to all of our issues.
Al, this is pretty overwhelming for Democrats, don't you think? I mean, it's almost impossible to keep track of the kind of activity that Trump has started. What's your take?
First of all, I agree with every word of what Craig said. Look, we have been subject to a 48-hour reality TV show. Joe Biden was rightfully accused of not facing the press enough and not being out public. But what did we have? We had 3 inaugural addresses, and then that ridiculous press conference signing the executive orders. I mean, it's all played out for television. It's all played out to try to keep his base excited, and it probably did that. I looked at his, so that it was a little bit vindictive. Obviously the pardons of violent criminals and extremist gang leaders who plan insurrections against our democracy, pretty dangerous. He's petty, taking away the security from John Bolton because he at one time he was his national security advisor. Now he's a dumb guy. I mean, I think everything that we have said about him in the last 4 or 6 years is true. And I mean, he does have the mind of about a 5-year-old, but he's president of the United States, and he's going to try to do all this stuff. I think, and let's face it, these executive orders can do a lot of damage. But as Craig said, they're going to be contested. When I was in the Clinton transition, one of the jobs I had was to put together the executive orders for the first day. And I, to be honest with you, I can't remember how many we did, but I went to all the top law firms and we drafted a group of the top lawyers in D.C. And we said we want to do executive orders in these areas. And we had a book and we did a bunch of executive orders. But this, it looks like, they sat around a table and said, how can we be the most outrageous we can? How can we get across this political point? The law be damned. So Jonathan Chait in Atlantic last night had a piece that said, we may have seen the high point of the Trump second administration. And I think there's some reality to that. The other thing I just want to say, and then I want to talk about the overreach, that I don't think will really even serve him well with his base. But there's also a bit of corruption, a lot of corruption. I mean, this crypto meme coin deal that he launched for him and Melania, just complete grift. I mean, they just want to make a lot of money. Maybe that'll stand up over time, but a lot of people are going to get hurt because they're going to buy this stuff and the value is going to go down. But it's just corrupt. Look, we know that a lot of these things are extreme, but there's also enormous overreach because he wants to emphasize his point so much. He is taking steps that the American people just aren't going to support. I mean, nobody but a few people on the extreme really want to see, will have any trouble with if he has a targeted effort to deport violent criminals. I mean, the Obama administration had standards, and it was criminals and recent illegal immigrants who snuck in. If it's a sensible ploy, but people aren't going to stand up for attempts to get rid of birthright citizenship, sending the military out to chase down law-abiding, undocumented people. Dave Leonard in the Times today had a chart of attitudes on immigration, and immigration is one of those things that if you just ask them, do you favor illegal immigration, everybody's against it, right? But when it comes down to the various things, and Trump goes overboard on every one of them, they're not so popular, and people are not going to like it. He didn't get he was hurt last time by breaking up families. The DEI thing. I mean, I understand that there are some people who are very concerned about the regime that enforces DEI, but do we really want to go back to Jim Crow in the 1950s? Do we really want to undo all the efforts of the civil rights movement? First of all, you can't do it. This is a different country. But secondly, people aren't going to, what's he going to do? He decides that LeBron James has tweeted against him. Is he going to put him in jail? I mean, it's nonsensical. And so my advice to the Democrats, which was your original question, is to, challenge, in the Congress, they ought to block the stuff they can block. A bunch of governors are already in court on a lot of this stuff. Rally people to some degree, as much as we can against it, but also stay calm, and figure out how we can strengthen our own party so we have a real alternative in 2026 and 2028. Trump said he was going to have shock and awe, and he certainly did. The last time we had shock and awe was in the Iraq War in the first few weeks. And I don't want to equate George W. Bush with Donald Trump, because George W. Bush may have had some wrong policies, but he was a good and decent man. And I will not say that about Donald Trump. But how did shock and awe work out for George Bush? It killed his presidency, because after the first few days, the shock and awe wore off, and the real consequences of what he did came to the forefront. So let's be calm. I don't think he's going to be able to do a lot of what he wants to do. He's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable in the short term, but in the long term, I think he'll be the most uncomfortable one.
Craig, I don't see any profile and courage so far by the Republicans who are in the Senate or in the House. It seems like there's absolutely no resistance to the Trump supposed mandate. What gives with that?
Well, ironically, one who may speak out is Mitch McConnell, who spent a good deal of his time trying to avoid the conflict. But I suspect that we're going to find that Mitch McConnell, free from his leadership position, not going to run again, his voice will be raised in opposition to some of the things that Trump wants to do, or some of the people he wants to nominate. And there may be others. For now, no one wants to, run up against the juggernaut that is Trump and the media machine. And so I think they're keeping their powder dry. They still don't have an agreement, by the way, in the House as to whether there's one big piece of legislation or two, or Trump said to Hannity, well, maybe it's a small bill and then there's a bigger, beautiful bill. Still don't quite understand the concept of a beautiful bill. But anyway, so not everything is falling into place. Some of these some of these hearings and ultimately the votes on confirming some of the individuals he's nominated, I think, are still in question. But I do think it's there's a tendency to say, look, the majority of people voted for him. This is what he wishes to do. Let's go let him do it. For every Republican in the House and for a third of the Senate, they have to seek re-election. But that's, 2 years from now. So I think they'll let it go this year, which does remind me, and this is a point that Al made about the Biden initiatives in the beginning. If you load everything up the way Trump has done, yes, it's photo op, big news story. We'll roll into the weekend with coverage of his first week in office. Maybe there'll be stories of all the things that have happened the first month. But by the time we get to the summer, how many people are going to remember what was in 200 executive orders? The only ones they will remember are the ones that are where Trump's being dragged through the courts, that are the most controversial. And so, if you really wanted a strategy to govern through executive order, somewhat dubious in my mind, but if that's the strategy you wanted to employ, I'd do 2 or 3 a week. I'd go out and explain why these things are so important. Talk to people who've been harmed by the adversity of federal government and claim that your executive order was going to solve their problems. Rolling them all out from the Oval Office on day one, yes, it's a photo op, but it's certainly no way to leave a lasting impression about what you really stand for and believe in. But again, that's a whole other question.
Al, you have the last word.
Well, Craig, here's the answer to your question about what a beautiful bill is. It's like the perfect phone call when he called Brad Raffensperger in Georgia to ask him to find 12,000 votes. Look, ever since he first made his cabinet nominations, I've said the test of our democracy may very well be whether any of these Republicans stand up and do their constitutional responsibility of advice and consent. And the answer is 0. We still haven't had anybody, I mean, maybe Susan Collins, I'm not sure what she's actually made the statement yet, but nobody has gone against, has stepped out against Pete Hegseth. And I was very worried that these confirmation hearings were just going to be, part of the reality TV show where Democrats try to attack him for personal problems and because they have appeal to, particular constituencies, but they don't do anything to undermine his real chance of getting nominated. And Republicans defend him, and nobody talks about his qualifications. And other than Alyssa Slotkin in those hearings, that's exactly what happened. Look, he's not it's pretty evident that he has a drinking problem and that he treats women badly, but that's not going to win Republican votes. What's going to win Republican votes is the danger he poses to national security, and we didn't do anything to attack him on that. And that's our problem. Their problem is they just go along like sheep to whatever Trump wants. And, maybe we'll see something on Tulsi Gabbard or the Kash Patel or one of the or RFK. I mean, RFK, I think, is probably the one who's ironically could be in the most trouble because of his vaccine position that is so well known. But look, in the end, our democracy has to work because the Congress, an equal branch of the government, stands up to the president when he overreaches and tries to assume too much presidential power. When I worked in the Senate and the House, people in both parties always were on the alert to do that. Now it looks like the Republicans won't do it and are afraid to do it, and the Democrats basically are more interested in making points with their constituencies than really standing up for congressional prerogatives. But let me end with this. For all the stuff President Trump has done and all the bad stuff that I think is bad, but he thinks is so good, his approval rating right now is still at 46%. That's underwater, okay? That's probably his high point.
Sure.
And so what happens when he goes down to where Biden was in the high 30s and Republicans in the House have to face reelection, get closer to reelection, and in the Senate, in some states, the senators are under fire. I think things will settle down, but there's no question that Trump has tried to change the system. He said he wanted to be a dictator on day one, and at least for his reality TV show, he's trying to play one. But in the end, we'll see. I mean, I have faith that our democracy in the end will hold, and that the courts and the Congress, but most importantly, the American people will at some point just say, we're not going to do this stuff. We had some problems, and we want a secure border, but we don't want the military going around our cities, picking out people and sending them home, breaking up families. We're concerned that merit isn't a big enough deal in public schools, but firing everybody who wants to see the civil rights laws enforced is not really the way to increase merit in the public schools. So I think things will get better, and Trump will recede, but it's going to be uncomfortable for a while.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you so much indeed. We will see you next week.